Hey guys, welcome and welcome back to my channel. Now this video is going to be an amazing one. I'm going to teach you guys how to make a blazer pattern. I made it so beginner friendly that anybody would be able to sew it. So in this video I'm going to be showing you guys the pattern making like I said earlier, and in tomorrow's video I'm going to be showing you guys the sewing tutorial, so you guys should watch out for that. Now let's get our intro in and do what? Stitch up. So guys, this is what you need for this tutorial. I'm going to list it out right here, and I'm going to link some links to where I got mine in the description box, so you guys can go check it out. So for this, I'm starting with the back pattern. So what you're going to do first is you're going to mark all the verticals. So you're going to measure your shoulder line, which will be the top line right there. Then you're going to measure your bust line, your waistline, and then the length of the jacket basically. Now if the length is going to be longer than your hip measurements, also measure your hip line. Now you're going to use lines to represent every single point. For the neckline, we're going to be using a neck width of 3 inches and a neck depth of 2 inches for the back. So 3 by 2 inches, that's what we're using for our neckline. Then you can create your neckline curve right here. I created it later on, but you can actually create it right now. Just do the curve right there so that you don't forget it. And then I'm going to go to the shoulder. I'm going to measure my shoulder to shoulder measurement, which is 15 inches divided by 2 gives me 7.5 inches. So divide your shoulder to shoulder measurement by 2, and then at that point you're going to mark 1 inch downwards for your shoulder slope. Now for my armhole, I'm going to measure 8 inches from this shoulder slope, and I'm going to use a line to represent both lines. So the armhole line and the line linking the shoulder to shoulder measurement to the armhole line. Once that is done, I'm going to measure my bust circumference divided by 4, and I'm going to add 1 inch for seam allowance. So just like I'm doing right here, I've measured it, and I'm now going to use that point to connect my curve. So this is the armhole curve right here, and after that I'm going to measure my nipple to nipple measurement. So that's your bust point to bust point. I'm going to measure it, divide it by 2, and then mark it on all the lines right here. So I'm measuring it on the chest line, which is the armhole line right here, the bust line, the waistline, and the hem or the hip measurement. Now on the waistline, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch in and out on both sides. So at that point right there, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch on the left and on the right, mark it right there, and then connect the lines from the chest line down to that 1/2 inch mark on the 2 sides. So just like I'm doing right here, from the chest line down to the waistline, then to the hem, then do it for the other side as well. So you're going to have something looking like this, and this is what it's going to look like. Now here I'm just cross-checking my bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance on the chest line and the bust line. On the waistline, you're going to measure your waist divided by 4, and you're going to add this 1 inch, and then you're going to add it to whatever you get. So let's say your waist measurement is 28, divided by 4 will be 7 inches, and then that 7 inches you're going to add this 1 inch dart allowance to that 7 inches, which gives it 8 inches, and then you're going to add 1 inch for your seam allowance. So if you're adding 1 inch seam allowance, that will be 9 inches that you're going to measure on this waistline. And then on the hip or the hem, you're going to measure your hip measurements divided by 4 plus your 1 inch sewing allowance as well. Once that is done, we're going to connect all the points together. So from the chest line to the bust line to the waistline, then to the hemline or the hip line. So just like I'm doing right here, this is what you are going to have on your pattern. And now if you want a shoulder dart, it's going to be really easy. So just measure what you have on your shoulder slope, divide it by 2, mark that point right there, and then connect that point down to the chest line. Can you guys see it? Connect it down to the chest line just like this, and that's it guys. That's all you need for your shoulder dart. And if you also want a snug fitting blazer, so at the back you're going to go to the waistline and go in by 1/2 inch. So can you guys see what I'm doing right here? Go in by 1/2 inch and then connect it from the chest line down to that 1/2 inch and down. Just create a tiny curve basically. So just like you're seeing right here, can you guys see how it goes like a greater than sign? That's what you need to do, and that's all guys. That's all for the back pattern. I'm going to just cut it out right now and move to the front pattern. Now guys, before you start the front pattern, make sure you leave 5 inches from the top to wherever you want to start from, and 3 inches, at least 3 inches from the center front. So I'm going to be using these measurements to work on my collar and the lapel in front, so you guys are going to see everything soon. And then the next thing I'm going to do is measure my neckline. So for my neckline, I'm going to be measuring 3 inches by 3 inches. So remember, the back is 3 inches by 2 inches, the front is 3 inches by 3 inches, and I'm going to mark it right there. Then I'm now going to measure my shoulder to shoulder measurement divided by 2. I'm also going to mark it right there. And then just like we did before, mark our bust line, chest line, waist line, hip line, then the hem. So do everything we did previously on the back for the front and use a line to represent all these lines. Also, don't forget to create your neckline curve and your shoulder slope just like we've done before guys. It's just like a repetition of what we did earlier.
I'm inspired by thirst, I'm inspired by worth. I desire your worst, so you can
draw the line down from the shoulder slope as well to the chest line, and then on this line you're going to measure what you have, half of it basically. So you're going to measure half of it. Once you've measured what you have as half of this line, you're going to mark that point right there and go inwards by 1/2 inch, and then go to that chest line, measure your bust measurement divided by 4, add 1 inch for seam allowance, and then connect your shoulder to that 1/2 inch point that we made, and then to the chest line. So just like I'm doing right here, the curve is going to be deeper than the back curve. Now that we're done with that, we're now going to measure our nipple to nipple measurements again divided by 2. So mark it on all the lines again and then draw your line down. Then like before again, you're going to go to the waistline and measure 1/2 inch on both sides just like we did earlier. Then mark 1 inch below the bust line, because that's where you're going to start your front dart from, 1 inch below the bust line. So remember, we started from the chest line for the back, but for this you're starting 1 inch below the bust line. So that's basically 1 inch after the bust line, and then you're now going to connect it to the waistline, then to the hem. Once that is done, I'm going to take my measurements again like I did before. Your waist divided by 4 plus the 1 inch we're using for this dart allowance and 1 inch for our seam allowance basically. Also measure your bust circumference divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance on the bust line as well. Then your hip divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance on your hip line or your hem. Once you're done, connect everything, and then we're going to move on to the next part.
worth. I desire your worst, so you can just hide while I work.
Now guys, to make my work easier, I want to cut out this pattern. So I'm going to extend the line on the shoulder line. So can you guys see what I'm doing right here? So on the shoulder line, just extend that line up and then cut out your pattern from there. Don't cut out anything from the center front, just cut out the entire side to the hem. So I've done that right here, and the first thing I'm going to do is go out by 1 inch. So guys, follow the places I'm measuring on my pattern paper right here. So go out by 1 inch right there, and then use a line to represent it so that you can see it clearly. So you're using a straight line down to the end. You're not slanting it yet, you're not doing anything, you're just drawing a straight line. Then I'm now going to extend the neckline to this 1 inch width that we just created. So just connect it right there. And then since I said I want my lapel to be to my waistline, I'm going to go from the shoulder, so the 3-inch shoulder width. You're going to go from there and you're going to draw a slant down to the waistline. So just like I'm doing right here, you're connecting it using a straight line down to the waistline. So the waistline, you are using the new 1-inch extension that we did. So just like I've done right here, this is what it should look like. And then I'm going to determine how wide I actually want my lapel to be. So you know we already have 1 inch here, so I'm going to add another 1 inch. You can make it longer, you can make it anyhow you want it, but I want 1 inch. So that's what I'm going to do right here, and I'm going to connect it using a slant to the new waistline center. So just like you can see right here, using a slant, you are slanting it to that waistline. Once you're done, it's going to look somewhat like this. So you have 2 slants basically, one from the shoulder line, so from the neckline down to the waistline, and then the other from this neckline down to the waistline. So that will now become your lapel. Now guys, it's time to work on our collar. So for this is why we created the back first. You're going to take your back pattern and measure all around the neckline, and then whatever you get, you're going to mark it upwards from the neck width. So just like I'm doing right here, you're going to follow that slant that you created using a diagonal shape just like that. So it's going to look like a slant. So you're going to still follow that slant and measure the exact measurements that you got when you measured round your neckline. You're going to make a new mark on the right of this point, 1/2 inch. So go out by 1/2 inch and make that point right there. Now that we've made that mark, we're now going to connect that slant. We're going to go to this new 1/2 inch mark. So we're no more using the first one we made, we're using this new point that we made. So you're going to draw a slant right there, connecting it to the neckline. So it's going to look like a very long neckline basically. So can you guys see what it looks like? This is what you're going to have on your pattern paper. And then diagonally again, a slight diagonal point. So just slightly, you're going to go out on the center front side by 3.5 inches. So 3.5 inches, you're going to go out slightly, guys, slightly by 3.5 inches. That's why I said you guys should leave 5 inches before making this pattern entirely. Now just take note of that point right there. We're going to come back to it, and then you're going to go to this point right here, go up by 1/2 inch. So this point right here, the center front, go up by 1/2 inch right there, and then connect it to that corner right there. So guys, just follow exactly what I'm doing in this video, because it's hard to actually explain, but when you're watching a visual, the visualization of it works really well. So just connect it right there, just like that. And then we're now going to connect our points. So that point right there, you're going to connect it to the 3.5 slight diagonal points. I like using all those words so that you guys can remember. And then we're going to connect that 3.5 inches to this new 0.5 inch that we just created. So can you guys see what I'm doing? Connect it from there using a curve. So it's not going to be a deep curve, just a slight curve. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm going to connect it using a slight curve, and that's it. That's my collar right there. So I'm just going to cut out the collar, just the collar, guys. Cut out the collar. And then just before I do any other thing, I'm going to do my shoulder slant. So measure whatever you have on your shoulder slope divided by 2, mark it, and then connect it to the bust line. Once you're done, you can now cut out your entire pattern.
I don't really know what comes next. I'm just doing my best, even though I'm so stressed out. Everything just feels like a test that I fail, so depressed when I can't seem to get out. But something deep.
And make sure you label it as well. So your center back, your center front, side back, side front, label it so that you don't have any mistakes, you know. So this is what it's going to look like. And now, like I always say, write every information you need to write. Then the other side of this center back, I'm going to add 0.5 seam allowance to it when I'm cutting it on my fabric. You know, I cut it out. I cut out the sewing allowance of the darts. So That's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to add 0.5 inch for the sewing allowance. I'm going to do that on the side back as well. So that side of the dart, you're going to add 0.5 seam allowance to all the dart sides. So for the main sides of the side front and side back, you're not adding any seam allowance because we already added them, when we were measuring our measurements. So you're just going to add on the dart side. For the color as well, you're going to add seam allowance all around. So that's what you're going to do for this color. And then that's all, guys. Like I said, tomorrow I'll be dropping the sewing tutorial of this particular pattern and you guys are going to love it, trust me. And if you try out this pattern, please tag me on Instagram at Lara Savage Creations. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, share this video, comment in the comment section, share it within your sewing community, your sewing lovers, your sewing friends, share it with them. And until my next video, do have yourself a wonderful morning, noon or night, wherever you are. It's still your favorite content creator and fashion entrepreneur, Lara Savage, signing out.